20146, your SMS line at Metropole TVKE across all your social media platforms. My name is Simba Elijah Charles Kianga. Let me take time to introduce the panel that is going to take us through the next part of our conversation this morning. Remember, you can get involved again. Our hashtag is business. All right, let's look at exactly who is joining us this morning. We're joined by Chacha Bichang, personal finance coach and economic analyst. Chacha, how are you doing, sir?
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Happy to have you around. All right, we're also joined by Reginald Kazipso, who is an economic analyst as well. Reginald, how are you doing, sir, on this cold day in Nairobi?
Morning, Simba. I am married, so I do not know what cold is.
We are aspiring to get there as well. Happy to see you, Reginald. All right, let's cross over to the next analyst that we have for you this morning. We're joined by Ngesa Marvin, a telecom engineer, Liquid Telecom. Marvin, good morning and welcome to Metropole Television.
Good morning, Chacha, and thank you for having us.
All right. My name is Simba Elijah Charles Kianga. Let's get into this conversation this morning. Now, lending rates are set to remain unchanged. The Central Bank of Kenya's Monetary Policy Committee opts to leave the central bank rate unchanged at 7%. Good. That's where we are. And I would like us to cross over to that data that we have for you this morning so we can actually look at that magical 7 all the way from April 2020 up to where we are right now. In fact, in March 2020, it was albeit just reduced by 25 basis points to 7. And then it has stuck there all the way to February 2021. And now March 2021, again, we're talking about that magical number, 7%. Reginald, let me bring you in now. Just before we cross over to Reginald, sorry, I also want us to look at the inflation numbers on a quarter by quarter basis as well this morning, so that you can actually see where we are coming from as well. And you can actually see where we are, albeit within a margin, but we've had that increase all the way up to where we are right now in March. Reginald, 7%, the magical number. I mean, for somebody asking you now, I'm asking how much is this lending rate now that is stuck at 7% really tied to what is going on in the fiscal side of the economy?
Simba is, I think, as I've always said, that's a useless exercise that the central bank goes through. That number they set affects nothing. Because they have no transmission mechanism for that 7%. So let me give an example. If they want the rate to be 7%, and our dealing department in the central bank only deals in government securities.
Yes.
Banks are not holding any corporate securities, any municipal securities. They're only holding government securities. So when you set a base rate, you are saying that all other rates are supposed to use that as your base rate. So if you then go look at the interbank rate, where interbank rate is currently at 5.2%, then how does the 5.2 relate to the 7%? What are they targeting? Because when they say 7%, then they are targeting to reduce to make sure the interbank rate is at 7%.
Yes.
Because then every other loan is based on what banks can lend from each other overnight. Yeah. From whatever banks get lend from each other overnight, upon that now they price their other loans in terms of riskiness of loans going forward. So you have a rate of 7%, but the government is borrowing at 12%. Again, you ask yourself, what's the purpose and point of this 7% rate? The central bank rate lost its potency when you remove the interest rate cap. Because when you had the interest rate cap, at least the 7% was the base which every loan was being priced at.
Yes.
And that now is just an exercise to fulfill a constitutional mandate where central bank monetary policy has to meet, and after they meet, they have to show evidence they have met. So they have to say, we have set the rate at 7, but they do not have the mechanism of transmitting that rate throughout the economy, whether in the short term, medium, or in the long term. So it is a good exercise for them, and for us to just get a view of what they think of the economy. from their statement that they produce, but the rate itself is not potent in any area of the fiscal economy or monetary side of it as well.
Yes, Reginald, you would have liked to think, just before I cross over to Chacha, you would have liked to think that just this coming at a time when on Friday the president did announce another round of measures within the economy on exactly how we're going to move forward under those COVID-19 containing measures, that this time maybe they would have really pushed for this tool to have some effect in the economy, but likely not, Reginald.
It doesn't have a mechanism for it to transmit into the economy. So
Yes.
that's why it's a tool that will not work.
Yes.
If they wanted to do something to help right now, but the only thing that central bank can do is control money supply, either by printing money or making banks lend more.
Yes.
How do you make banks lend more at this scenario? The only tool that they have is the CRR, which is the cash reserve ratio, where they can tell banks, okay, we have reduced the cash reserve ratio from 4.5, it's now 3.5. That injects 1% of all banks' holdings back to them, and the banks have to look for something to do with that money. For them to make money on it, they have to lend it out. Unfortunately, that will also become important because you have a hungry government that is borrowing on this side. So any money the bank gets, they will still end up in government security. So there are two things that need to happen. The government needs to stop borrowing domestically at the scale that they are borrowing. Then if central bank reduces their cash reserve ratio, banks have additional liquidity, which they'll have to find a viable project to give in the economy. But as it stands right now, the central bank rate is just there for sake of economic discussion, like what we are doing right now.
Pretty much. Chacha, let me bring you in as well in this discussion as well. Now, do you share the same sentiment that, well, it looks as if it's just, well, an unfunctional tool within the economy as it stands?
Oh, well, thank you, Simba. This 70% lending rate as a base rate really brings in two interesting scenarios. One, that does it mean that now the banks will lend to clients whereby they recharge a minimum of 7%, which is actually most unlikely. Two, as my brother and colleague has said about now central bank lending to actually other banks, the interbank lending rate, it's far much below. And I think this arose some years back when the president actually capped the bank interest rate, whereby the CBK lending rate actually came much lower to force actually banks that were exploiting Kenyans in terms of charging exorbitant interest to a much lower rate, whereby banks now are not supposed to charge interest that is far above 15%. And you'll find that now the second scenario, that this base rate of 7% really does not translate into improved economy, because most banks nowadays are charging over 10%, in fact, close to 15%. What does that mean? That now even borrowing from the banks among the Kenyans who have been hard hit by the COVID-19 is much lower, because we are talking of the austerity measures taken. We are talking of now many businesses collapsing, going down, a decline in revenue, meaning that the uptake of loans among Kenyans has gone lower. So this actually lending rate here does not mean anything to the poor Kenyans. And in fact, you find it's the government that is now borrowing from itself. Government now borrowing maybe from the central bank, and also borrowing from Kenyans in the form of floating treasury bills and treasury bonds. Really, we need to go further than the government needs to introduce another wave of austerity measures, which can now go beyond this 7% base lending rate, to dig deep on how we can improve the economy so that the common man who is facing the aftermath of the pandemic can actually get access to more affordable loans that can help to improve business, and which we are saying really the environment is not very conducive for business. Thank you.
Pretty much. Let's move on to the next issue this morning, where Kenyans rejected U.S. claims that Huawei poses a security risk to the country after Safaricom announced that it will be partnering with Huawei to launch 5G services in the country. John Sheru, the Cabinet Secretary for ICT, said the U.S. pressure on countries to ditch Huawei in new networks is a political issue without evidence, while backing Safaricom's deal with Huawei. The US has been urging its European allies and others not to use Huawei, one of Safaricom's network vendors, along with Nokia, citing security concerns. Analysts say this is a strategic move that will benefit Safaricom, whose core revenue has experienced a slower growth rate over the years. Customers who want to benefit from the 5G network have to acquire devices that are 5G compatible. Good. Let's cross over and analyze that service revenue for Safaricom so we can actually see exactly why the stress to move to 5G is important to them. This morning. Good. In terms of the key performance indicators, you can actually see where the service revenue is coming fast at that 251 billion, crossing over to the next level of analysis this morning as well. Is also Safaricom's. Rich, if you could move to the next data point, please, if you can. Fantastic. We'll move over there once we have it this morning. Looks as if we're stuck on that. All right. Now, let me bring in Marvin this morning. Marvin, let's talk about 5G. Let's begin from there, really. Why is the move for 5G really a stress from Safaricom at a time when even 4G is not fully yet in the country at 100%?
Thanks, Chacha. 5G is basically the fifth generation of wireless network technology.
Yes.
That will deliver massive capacity and massive connectivity. It will enable carriers and telcos to be able to overcome some of the challenges that cannot be solved by the existing network infrastructure.
Yes.
And by the existing network infrastructure, I mean the 4G network, the 3G network, the 2G network, and the other generation networks. And 5G will enable these carriers to be able to have new services.
Yes.
To be able to have new services like Internet of Things, like augmented reality, virtual reality, that will give them new revenue streams that they could add to what they're having at the moment.
So somebody would ask you now, how different is 5G from 4G? Because we do know the one that is getting pushed in the country to on a higher level is a 4G.
5G is different from the 4G. Number one, from the number of connections.
Yes.
5G will have 100 billion connections. It will have 1 million devices connected per square kilometer, while 4G will have like thousands and thousands of connections in a single unit called a cell.
Yes.
Secondly is speed. 5G will be 10 times faster than 4G. In fact, it will have speeds of up to 10 gigabits per second. And then also there's something called latency. Ideally, the experience you normally have when you are having the video calls. If you make a request to a network, how fast can it respond? So 5G is expected to have a single digit latency. That means that you'll be having a better experience while viewing content on the internet or online.
So another way that we're looking at it this morning, Marvin, is the sort of investment that goes into the infrastructure for 5G. Can you explain to us what is going to happen differently for any other company that wants to get into 5G?
Well, ideally, what's going to change the network infrastructure is the addition of the cloud to the entire network.
Yes.
There's going to be an extension of the cloud platform, the network, and also the virtualization of the entire network. And this is going to happen on the entire network, from something called the access network to the backbone network and to something called the core network.
Yes.
In the access network, we're going to have new things like Cloud Run and new technologies like beamforming, where instead of having signals spread over in one particular area, you're going to have signals targeting a particular receiving device. And then also you're going to have technologies like massive MIMO, basically multiple input, multiple output. This is where you're going to have a bunch of antennas or a bunch of radios that are sending and receiving data at a particular point or in an area. And this way, it's going to be able to increase throughput in that area. On the backbone network or the transport network, we're going to have things like software-defined networks or SDN.
Yes.
And SDN is going to enable the network to be able to know how to forward the packets to the next nodes. And then also we're going to have things like network slicing, where you're going to have standalone virtual networks. Standalone virtual networks, several of them that can be placed on a single physical network. So that way, you're going to cloudify the entire network and have things like network function virtualization. That is going to enable the network to be able to have more capacity, have better speeds, and also connect billions and billions of devices.
So in terms of really this network investments that we're talking about here, Marvin, this morning, somebody want to ask you, why is it a bit difficult for these networks to actually be installed in multiple locations in the country? Because it's when we're talking about 4G right now, some other places actually don't even have access to 3G, which is actually what we call the old generation sort of network.
Well, the network is normally being deployed depending on the needs,
yes.
or the demand in a particular area.
Yes.
You can have a place where there's a demand for smart cities, there's a demand for things like augmented reality and virtual reality, and you can also have places where the demand is just for probably texting. So, of course, these two different areas, you can't give them same technology because they have different requirements. You'll give them different technologies.
So there seems to be this push for Safaricom to actually get this 5G. But if you look at it, they're saying, underline that anybody who wants to use 5G will have to get a 5G enabled device. Marvin, how expensive are these devices that are 5G enabled? And if the stress is not essentially on 5G, then what other technology can Safaricom sort of bank on that is going to benefit from this 5G that they're really stressing on investing in the country?
Well, I'm not really sure about the current price of these devices.
Yes, but would you say they're expensive, Marvin? Would you say they're expensive?
Come again?
Would you say they're expensive?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every new technology, normally there's a new complex technology that's going to be added on the phone.
Yes.
You are definitely going to have a new radio inside the phone, the antennas and everything. And the complexity and a new radio inside this new phone in this new generation is going to make the phone more expensive than the other. For example, 3G mobile devices have more complex radio modules than 2G mobile devices, and that's the same as 5G and 4G. The more complex it is, and the new radio it has, the more expensive it will be.
Pretty much. Just Marvin, just hold on to that thought, because I want to cross over to Reginald, because under this investment, Reginald, we do have the CS, ICT, speaking to the US for the very first time under the China-US trade war that we've seen, that has seen actually Huawei's technology on 5G actually uprooted from every state in the US on whatever level they want, because we know they're given up to around 2022 to make sure that there's no 5G technology that exists within the US that is supported by Huawei. But now Kenya and Safaricom as well is now sort of partnering with China, specifically Huawei, to make sure that we have the 5G technology in the country. And ICT Cabinet Secretary John Sheru is telling the US, well, that's a political issue. We do not think that, well, this is going to be any issue with us here. Is that going to be a point of a relation tussle between the US and Kenya, Reginald?
If the US really want us to get rid of Huawei,
yes.
Truth be said, the CS can just stamp all they want. But when they become serious, we then look at where is our bread really buttered, in terms of if the US says no AGOA thing from Kenya will enter US, that's the whole textile industry got. If they say no military hardware and stuff like that will be sent to Kenya because of Huawei and China's, that's a whole military funding gone. So if they really want to tighten the screws, they can actually do that. And we will hear ourselves backtracking that we are no longer using Huawei, we are no longer using and all that stuff. So, and knowing that we have not finished negotiating the trade deal that Trump had started, it might actually start becoming a bone of contention. However, the Biden presidency is more China lenient than the Trump presidency.
Yes.
They don't feel like they have a firm footing and a strong footing like what China, what like Trump had against the Chinese. But as you saw the first meeting between the Chinese and the US in Atlanta, it was more of a gloves off. And the Chinese told the US counterpart that they have no moral authority to govern anything, and their voice is not the voice of the globe, the voice of the United States alone. So there's still a lot of tension. So depending on which side the Biden administration leads in terms of wanting to put a block on one way, if they want to do it, they will be able to do it, and nothing will be able to do. Do we need 5G in the country? It is a good technology to have. Do we have the infrastructure and to utilize it? I think we're still a bit far from that. Because 5G will work more on the Internet of Things. Yeah, controlling cars using your phone, controlling housing, controlling all those things. This is where 5G will be more important. But if you're bringing 5G just for streaming movies and sending text messages, that's a waste of investment in terms of cope the investment in terms of Safaricom. So I believe they are setting themselves up if the country moves towards a digital strategy where you want to move more to the Internet of Things, where you control your fridge using your phone, your car using your phone, your TV using your phone. Then you realize the connectivity that is needed is different from a connectivity for streaming a movie. But if they just put it there and there is no national strategy towards moving towards the Internet of Things, then Safaricom is going to find it very hard to recoup that massive investment that they're making.
Pretty much. Marvin, just as we clear this conversation, can you help us go for this break in 1 minute, if you may? What investment opportunities really are open for us once the Safaricom therefore strengthens their 5G presence in the country?
Well, come again? I think I didn't hear you clearly.
Yes, just asking on exactly what investment opportunities are open to the economy should Safaricom stamp their 5G presence in the country.
Well, like I said, 5G is going to enable us to have a new business model.
Yes.
And new use cases, like in virtual reality and augmented reality, where it can in fact revolutionize how students are learning in the class, where they can even take a tour to some remote location just from the classroom. And all these business models and these different use cases definitely is going to enable different people across the country to be able to come up with these different businesses. And I mean, the use cases are going to be so much, almost like the same way that in 2G, we didn't know the kind of business models we're going to have, or the kind of possibilities we're going to have with the network.
Pretty much. All right, Marvin, I would like to thank you very much for joining us this morning. But we continue with Reginald and Chacha. But once we come back, there's something going on in the banking industry in the country, because we do know Equity gave us their full year results. And if we look at them, their profit dropped by 11% to 20 billion shillings. Their assets currently stand at more than 1 trillion, but there's something that they did. They cancelled their dividend. They are not the first bank to do that. We've seen Absa take the same direction. We've seen Equity now take the same direction. But we've seen other banks in the country that have made lower profits than Equity also paying their dividends. So what is really going on in the banking industry amid the latest news that we have also that banks are now the leading in terms of sharing investor wealth at the lockables at the onset of these new COVID-19 measures that we are operating under since Friday last week. Once we come back, we'll stay with Chacha and Reginald here on a Business AM.